You're listening to Tabletop and Beyond, the Guild 9 gaming podcast covering board games to war games and beyond.
Hello everybody, and welcome back to Tabletop Gaming. I am your host, Justin, and I am here with my Force and Destiny master, Dan.
Hey, welcome.
We've got a great show for you guys today. We are going to be talking about Star Wars, the RPG. We've mentioned it several times on the show, but we're going to do a bit of a deep dive and talk about just the general aspects of it, and if you're interested, then maybe where you can find it to get into it. But let's start with our Geek Week. Dan, how was your Geek Week this week?
Well, since we're still in COVID-19 land, I did download the free version of Warriors of Waterdeep from the D&D property, and the advertising really wanted to convince people that it was the first true D&D experience on a mobile app, and boy did it not deliver.
It's a turn-based thing with cards, right? It's very similar to the Star Wars one that you have, I think, right?
It's very similar, and yeah, you can buy your way in and spend money on it and get extra things, but it's not even like there's some like loose, they pay just kind of loose attention to the core mechanics of, the 6 attributes in the D&D 5e roll set, but it's really not. It's just lame, and the graphics are terrible and cartoony, and I'm like, well, my 7-year-old might like this.
Yeah.
But it just made my heart hurt that I was like, yeah, Waterdeep, this is like a big brand that D&D is really, Wizards of the Coast is really doubling down on. This could be like one of their flagship properties, and it is just a gross money grab.
It's a super gross money grab. I was just going to say that. I actually played it for a little bit and then just deleted it from my phone because I'm like, I don't have the time or attention span to grind through this without dropping lots of money in here, and that's really what they want you to do.
Yeah. I'm going to give it unless there's something about that IP that really does something for you, and you don't have another one of those apps in your life trying to tempt you to spend your way through a hard part of the game, then you might like it. But for me, I was deeply disappointed and annoyed at the advertising, mainly because I've played other games that are much closer to a D&D like experience, on a mobile platform, on a computer platform, and this one was so far from it. I just ached inside after I played it for an hour. It actually depressed me about D&D more than it did getting me excited to get into to play more D&D.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And again, that was a big onus for me on deciding to get rid of it as well. It just was taking up space on my phone.
I'm going to delete it while we're talking.
Boom.
I did, however, after our other episode, I did download D&D Beyond just to play with it a little bit.
Okay.
And it was, I enjoyed it. It's been fun. I'm not currently in a D&D game right now, so I don't have like an application for it, but I poked around with it, and for spending $0, I was pretty pleased with what it was providing.
I think it's a pretty solid application, and I think it's going in the right direction where tabletop's meeting technology,
Oh, yeah?
So, yeah. But if you're interested in that, that's our very first episode, folks. So you can
go right back there.
Go right back to episode number 1 if you haven't listened to it yet. So speaking of which, you touched on another aspect of Geek Week. You ran our last session in a 3-episode Star Wars session, right?
Yep, we made it to episode 3. We concluded the entire story, and Justin dared me that I wouldn't kill a player character, and I did kill a player character.
I mean, technically you did,
I did.
But
he was
came
dead.
Back to life.
He was dead, and I forgot that one of the other characters had the one game effect that would bring someone back to life. If you do it immediately after a character dies, if you do it like the next round, you can bring them back to life, and he had it. And so I was like, okay, well, it's not on your character sheet for nothing. So yeah, it's good.
So yes, Dan, you're technically correct. You did kill a player, and you killed him good.
let's be honest, it was way late at night. We were way past midnight, and I'm like, I could bring this big bad guy back in here to kill a few more of you.
That's true.
But I think I saw you doze off during the game on the video chat.
No, I did not doze off. I did not doze off.
Your eyes were closed.
I was actually looking down at my phone at one point, so that's what it was.
Which is just as bad as falling asleep.
Yeah.
Maybe even worse.
Well, one of the nice things, though, is that, so to be fair, that day we had been putting together a huge garden project.
Right.
And so it was like an all-day affair thing. And in fact, we finished with all the house stuff like at 7:40, and our session started at 8, And so I actually availed myself. So I'm getting a little into my Geek Week. I availed myself of some of that time during our RPG to do some airbrushing.
Yeah, I noticed. Yeah, that was cool.
Which was actually kind of nice because I could listen, and then when I needed to participate, I just would lean over and kind of unmute and be there. But it prevented me from dozing off, believe it or not.
Good.
Good. So.
Good. A good time was had by all. If you can play a game and paint a mini at the same time without annoying anyone who's playing with you, I think that's a win that's a double win in my mind.
And I was gonna say, and for the record, that's not a reflection on your skills as a GM. It was more a reflection on the fact that I had worked myself to death earlier in the day and I was pretty tired. So.
And I know your mini backlog right now. You have a lot of painting you got to do. I'm like, well, every time he sits down there, that's one less I'll hear about. Oh, and I got to paint that, and I got to paint that, and I got to paint that.
Yeah. But, a little bit more of my Geek Week, I've been getting through a lot of the backlog because I was off all last week. My work has had me doing a half on, half off, so I work 1 week, I'm off 1 week, I work 1 week. So this week I'm working, last week I was off. I was able to get through a lot of painting and assembly. And let's see, what else did I do? Oh, I played the Batman Telltale game. So are you familiar with the Telltale games?
No, tell me about this.
These are like a choose-your-own-adventure, but a video game. Okay, so you make certain choices. It affects choices later on down the thing. If you're too slow, you die, and then it kicks you back out, and you start over again. It's like you flip back to the last page, Nice. And so they're a lot of fun. There's 2 episodes. There's episode 1 of Batman, and then there's episode 2. I had played episode 1 of Batman probably 4 or 5 years ago. And then episode 2 was free this month on Xbox's Games with Gold. So I downloaded it and played it. It was a lot of fun. And let me tell you about this mishap this week. So this is going to affect future Geek Weeks. Yesterday, I was sitting with my wife. My kids and I had just gotten done playing Minecraft. And so there's like an active controller, I think, under my wife's leg, right? That one of the kids hadn't turned off. So check this out. I'm like, oh, cool, there's a sale on Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Right? It's like 20% off or something like that. So it's only like $38. I'm like, wow, this is a really good deal. And I look at the trailer again. I'm like, yeah, man, this looks like a great game. And I said, I think I might hold off on it, though, just because, I don't want to, purchase anything right now just in case we're going to need money later or whatever. Next thing I know, the accept button hits, the PayPal authorization button hits, and the install button hits, all bam, bam, bam. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on? And I look over, and my wife's leg had hit the controller as I was looking at. So it was a butt purchase.
You got to blame her for buying something you wanted.
And when you buy it digitally, you can't. There's no refunds.
You can't unbuy it. That's awesome.
So my reaction literally was, wait, whoa. Well, okay.
Okay. All right. Well,
because it looks like a great game, and I'm sure there's listeners out there that will avow that the Fallen Order game is awesome. So yeah. Certainly. I'm looking forward to it. So yeah, that's pretty much my Geek Week, though. A lot of mini painting, a lot of random stuff that I've been meaning to get to. I watched half of Starship Troopers because I'd never seen it before.
Oh wow!
And it was terrible.
You just have to be in the right mindset, and you have to look at the year it was made, too.
I know. I had to finish it, but I'm just like, wow, this is really bad. This is really bad even for 97.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it was kind of made that way, though. It was made that way on purpose.
It's a 90s action, popcorn movie from an amazing, what was it? Who was that? Starship Troopers? Who was the writer
Paul
of that?
Van Noveren?
Yes. Everybody says the book is amazing. Or is it Heinlein? I can't remember. But I apologize. My geek cred is killing me here. But everyone who watches the movie aches and says, this thing could have been so great if they just would have gone with the books. So. Jason
and I were talking last week, I think, off mic after our episode, and we were saying that we had heard that they were going to redo it more like the book, and it looks like production started in 2011, and so that doesn't bode well for Starship Troopers remake to come out. We're 9 years after production had started.
Yeah, it was a Heinlein novel, and everyone's, and anything by Heinlein is just amazing science fiction. So I highly recommend getting into it. Not that I've read it, but it has only had very positive buzz if you're not familiar with it. So Starship Troopers, the movie, just pop the popcorn and don't feel bad if you're looking down at your phone. It's okay. Everybody's cool with you. It's okay.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, so what news we got this week?
Looks like Vampire the Masquerade is kickstarting again. I guess we're going right back to the 1990s. Vampire the Masquerade Vendetta.
Yeah, this is a card game, actually. It's kind of like a deck-building game that's based on the RPG of it. And it looks kind of interesting. I don't know if you had a chance to really dive into the Kickstarter itself, but one of the cool things that I saw in this is that under sort of the campaign details, if you go to the bottom of that section, they've got links for you to virtually play it right now.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So get in there. Check it out.
Yeah, so you can get in there, you can try it out, and the artwork looks pretty awesome. I mean, if you're into the whole crazy vampires and all that stuff. So,
You want a little bit of nerd trivia here?
Yeah.
So, Vampire has been a card game before. It was a collectible card game at the same time that Magic came out. It came out in 1994, and the first version of it was called, wait for it, Jihad.
No way.
So way before 9/11, they even then had to rename it and call it Vampire: The Eternal Struggle, and not go with Jihad. Because even back in 1994, people were like, "That's not cool, man. That's not cool."
Yeah. Interesting.
But it was great.
Yeah.
It was a great game. You had to. Everybody would buy those little glass beads as their blood tokens, and you'd have to spend blood to activate powers, and if somebody hit you, you'd lose blood. Of course I know nothing about this virtual game, but it sounds like something that needs to be played with just a little bit.
So again, this is an actual card game, it printed out, you know what I mean? But you can download the living rule book right now, okay? So you can get in with the rules, and you have three options. You can print and play download. Mm-hmm. You can try it on the Tabletop Simulator, which I think leads into another news item that you might have. Or you can try it on Tabletopia, which, listen, I mean, I think that's kind of awesome for a Kickstarter campaign to basically say, try our game, we know you're going to love it, get in here, test it out, and then back our projects because you're going to want the physical version.
Well, and it's super risky. I'm going to give these guys credit for putting it out there like that, because you could put it out to the universe, and if people are downloading it for free, they go, well, why would I spend money on the Kickstarter if I don't mind this version that I printed off my crappy inkjet printer? And maybe that's the target audience that wasn't going to drop money on the Kickstarter, but I've got to give them credit for sticking their necks out. This is not the first game that I've heard of where you can play before you back.
Yeah.
And I think the jury's out. I think we're going to have to see how a lot of these play before you back Kickstarters get shaken out. There's 2 or 3 other out there that I'm aware of, and I anything that helps Kickstarter, great, or anything that helps the games get out there is great. But if it hurts sales, then we may not see play before you back as much.
Yeah. Well, I think the draw is I can get some cool like physical copy, right? Mm-hmm. And B, there's like all sorts of like cool little tokens. There's maps. There's position tiles. There's also, I mean, like, you get the kit and caboodle with it, and so
you get the full experience.
Listen, I did a print and play with Secret Hitler before it came out when it was still on Kickstarter, and I was convinced that I backed it right away because it was so much fun, and I'm like, this in a more professional format, like with a better board than the one I printed out, is going to be so much more fun. Now, the difference being that you can actually digitally play it, and so but I think they're also trying to create that community. You got a living rule book, you can have the community, and I don't know if digital is going to be exclusive to physical. I don't think it would be for the community.
Cool.
So,
well,
anyway,
the art in it looks amazing. It's probably a great, if you're into vampire and gothic stuff, it probably looks like a great buy, regardless of the Kickstarter, regardless of the print and play, etc. I think it looks like a very high quality game.
Yeah. So another item of news. This is something that's near and dear to my heart. Square Enix. So they make all the Tomb Raiders. They make the Final Fantasies. They are giving away 2 games right now as part of a stay home and play campaign during the COVID-19 epidemic type of thing. So you can get onto Steam. It's only through Steam right now, so it's not on consoles, unfortunately. But it's on Steam, and you can download the 2013 Tomb Raider, which is a fantastic game. I absolutely adored that game. And then, so that's like a, first-person RPG, or third-person RPG,
sure.
I guess. And then the Temple of Osiris, which is kind of a top-down game that you kind of are running through. And both of those are just a total blast to play. So they're totally free. You keep them forever, too, which is awesome. It's not like they'll go away and you don't have digital rights to them in, 3 weeks or whatever. You get to download it, play it, keep it forever. I think it's a kind of a cool, interesting thing that game companies are trying to do to help, spread awareness of staying home and staying in during this time.
Yeah, that's really generous of them. And it's going to make more sedentary, lazy people out of us all. Yay! Woo-hoo.
Yeah, exactly.
Just kidding.
Yep. Let's see. Oh, Paizo. Am I saying that right? Paizo?
I've heard it pronounced all the different ways. That's the way I've most commonly heard it.
So they announced that they're coming out with a Pathfinder Beginner Box, much akin to the D&D starter kit, right? So it's an adventure in a box. It comes with some pre-gen things. They've got like a 80-page Hero's Handbook that's like for all the rules and character generation if you want to kind of do your own thing. It's got a Game Master's Handbook as well, which is kind of awesome. It's got 20 pages of monsters in there. Let's see, they've got 100 character and monster pawns that you can use on. So they're not really a meeple, but they're kind of like little
pogs are very useful. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
I've got a little collection of my own, and they are very, very handy considering how much work it is to deal with minis. You can throw 100 pogs in a plastic bag and be good to go for hours and hours and hours. Try throwing 100 minis in a plastic bag and not having to sort through them.
Yep. And let's see. It comes with some reference cards for players and also a complete set of dice, a D20, D12, D10, D8, D6, and D4.
So I have
whole RPG dice.
I have nothing against Pathfinder, except I had kind of an unfortunate Starfinder experience at Gen Con last year, and that's a tale for another day. But I've said it before, and now anybody who's listening who likes Pathfinder is going to burn me an effigy on my front lawn for saying this out loud. The difference between D&D and Pathfinder is the exact equivalent difference between vanilla ice cream and vanilla bean ice cream. You could say, look, it's different. It has little flecks in it. Look how different it is. And I'm like, guys, I don't care how you want to. Don't try to convince me. It's just D&D. Well, and it was designed that way. Pathfinder 1 was designed to say, D&D 3.5 was pretty great, everybody.
That's it, right?
Let's tweak it and keep it going. So for me, the fact that there's a beginner box, much like there's been a beginner box for D&D, and there's like 4 beginner boxes now, is just more proving in my mind that the difference between Pathfinder and D&D, I don't care what edition you're talking about, is the difference between vanilla and vanilla bean ice cream. If you ever wanted to explain Pathfinder to somebody, you'd say it's D&D. And people say, well, what's different? You'd be like, well, there's area effect things, and the feats are different, and the talents are different, and there's, grappling rules are very. It's like, dude, they're exactly for the rest of the planet Earth. They're almost irrecognizably identical to each other.
Yeah, they kind of are, and you hit it right on the head, right? Pathfinder was created by dudes who really loved D&D 3.5. and wanted to keep that party going when D&D sort of went off into, 4th edition and, eventually 5th edition. Now, there is Pathfinder 2.0, and I couldn't even tell you what the difference. I have never played Pathfinder before, but there's some hardcore people out there that love it.
And if you love it, good on you. Keep playing it. Yeah. And don't burn me an effigy on my front lawn. I'm not trying to down your game. I think the more people that are playing them, the better. It's just, if that's, if it's the version between, if you're paying attention to the difference between rock and hard rock and they're just fine gradations where a person who's just a little bit more removed, those fine gradations become less and less relevant. But if you're a Pathfinder fan, you're a Pathfinder fan. Go enjoy, and I'll bitch about the lousy game master I had at Gen Con on another podcast.
So this has, again, 2 books. It has the Hero's Handbook that's 80 pages, 96-page Game Master's Handbook. It's got, dice. It's got some other stuff. I don't think this is going to be the $20 D&D starter kit that you're going to find at Target.
It's probably 30, 40.
Yeah, I was going to say probably 40 to 50 range.
And you got to ask yourself,
$49.99.
Who's their real target audience if the barrier to entry is so high. So We'll see when the pricing comes out. We'll talk about some other starter kits from games I'm more familiar with, and how the low barrier to entry is a really great gateway drug to get people into the game.
I was going to say, like, if it's cheap enough, if it's in the $30 range, I may pick it up. Just because it's another system that we could try out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I'm open to playing Pathfinder 2. I mean, I know enough about Pathfinder 1 to make these broad generalizations, but I'm kind of a blank canvas when it comes to Pathfinder 2.
Yeah. So in terms of other boxes that are coming out, there's a new Warhammer 40K box set that just dropped from Games Workshop, and it's Space Wolves versus Orcs. The models in it are absolutely amazing. It's got some. It works in conjunction with some of the new books that have come out. Everything that I'm hearing from everybody is that this looks like it's going to be a great set. I mean, there's some hardcore Space Wolves guys out there that love their Space Wolves, Space Marines, and there's people who just love orcs. And the boss from the orc, he is Gazkul, and Gaskell Thraka, and his model is just like he's a giant mech orc. Like he's got these huge like industrial claws, like a 4 like rocket launcher arm, you know, like he's just humongous and amazing.
Nice.
And like totally fits within the theme, and it's gonna be awesome. Like it looks like a great starter box. So if you're wanting to get into 40K, it's probably a great box to get. Go find somebody, split it. Someone who wants Space Wolves, someone who wants Orcs, and then just split it up. It's called the Wolf and the Beast, and it looks awesome.
Hey,
So,
once again, lowering barriers to entry gets more people involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, Dan, a couple weeks ago, there was some Fantasy Flight game news about RPGs that came out, and I've been saving it for you to talk about it, because you called it. You called it.
Well, you know what? I'm going to be honest. I called it wrong. I thought that they would that FFG would. We were considering whether or not they were consolidating the different product lines from their different companies, because Asmodee owns a bunch of companies, and the company that owns Asmodee owns a bunch of companies. And so they're consolidating their RPGs into a company out of Spain called Edge Entertainment. And there is if you go on their website, you will see the announcement that they love RPGs and they're looking forward to taking over Star Wars RPG Genesis and L5R, Legend of the Five Rings, which is great news. I was more pessimistic. I thought they would just stop printing them and they would just disappear into the ether. So I'm very, very pleased that the books will continue to be printed. So the run on the books was just a temporary thing. I almost got my full complete collection. I had a guy I bought one off of eBay to complete the last book in my collection, and then magically the post office never got it.
Oh.
So he gave me a refund, and I'm like, okay, I know you decided to sell it to somebody else for twice as much. I get it.
Exactly.
But that's okay. Well, he gave me a refund the day I mentioned. It never showed up. Wink, wink, wink. So anyway, long story short, I am worried about the quality of the games coming out of Europe, because we have a lot of non-native English speakers writing the new supplements. I have a bit of a worry there, but I'm glad there's the beast is still breathing and alive. It's just being kept in a zoo overseas. So it's all good news, and for folks that have been really investing in that game, they don't have a dead RPG on their shelf. They have one that's alive and well, and that goes for Genesis and Legend of the Five Rings. And I'm looking forward to actually playing Legend of the Five Rings. I hope I can get into a session at Gen Con this year.
Yeah, exactly. I think that someone taking it over is a good thing, even if it's just for reprinting, right? So that it just doesn't peter out and die. So, so that was good news. I thought it was good news anyway.
It was, and I was shocked. I was telling everybody, buy them now. They're gonna be gone by the end of the year. And I was wrong. Exactly. I was wrong. I was very happy to be wrong. That was good.
Yep. All right.
So a lot of stuff is getting canceled.
Yeah.
Because of COVID-19. Critical Role announced they're not broadcasting because they don't want to have 10 people in the same room together.
I would have thought that they would have just kind of like dialed in.
I know.
Because to be honest with you, there's so many people that watch that it's almost like one of those things that it's like, please give us something to watch while we're stuck in our house. You know what I mean? Yeah,
I think they're being a bit over dramatic about it, but then that's very consistent with that crowd of folks.
Yeah.
So, all you have to do is have, just do a video chat version of it. Maybe there's good reasons why they can't do that. Well, that would mess up their flow or their feng shui of what they want to produce. And they have very high standards of what they want to produce. So if they want to halt production and turn off their money spigot, okay.
It's their deal, right? But I would have just thought that they would have found an alternative, option. But whatever.
I would have hoped that they would have demonstrated that the world can still spin even in these trying times. But hey, they probably have their own lives and families and other things they have to pay attention to, and it's not they need to go to their jobs and make money, because the $20 million they made off their Kickstarter is not paying the bills. Let's be honest.
Yeah. Right.
Sorry. All right. The UK Games Expo has announced they'll postpone the Birmingham UK Convention until August 21 to August 23. UK Games Expo is one of the largest conventions in the world, and that is a big deal.
Yeah.
So that is the equivalent of it's up there in the top 3, 4, or 5 conventions on the planet, up there with Gen Con and the one in Europe, the one in Germany, the name is Essen, I think it's called. It escapes me at the moment. That one has been postponed. At least it's not canceled.
Yeah.
Gary Gygax's son Luke, he created Gary Con back in 2008. It was supposed to be March 26 to March 29 in Lake Geneva, where Gen Con comes from, Gen and Geneva. That has been straight up canceled. Steve Jackson Games announced the cancellation of the second annual Fnord Con, originally scheduled for April 3rd to April 5 in Austin, Texas. So I'd never actually heard of a Fnord Con, but cool.
Yeah.
It's Steve Jackson Games. They're a big deal, and if they're not getting together, that's a thing. And Adepticon, which you are very familiar with, in Illinois, March 25th to March 29. That is straight up canceled. And that's got to be a kick in the guts too.
Oh, for a lot of people, that's probably between the Nova Open, Adepticon, and the Las Vegas Open. Like, those are like the big major tournaments in the U.S. for Warhammer,
Yeah.
The interesting thing about it, though, is that Games Workshop does big reveals at these larger conventions, so like their new battle box or something that's coming out, and they're going to do it virtual, I think, on Monday, and just kind of announce it to everybody that you can dial in and now watch it, because they still want to sell their stuff, obviously.
Yeah, they're not going to delay a product line until Nova Open. That doesn't make any sense. FFG, like we were just talking about, they suspended all organized play until at least June 1st, maybe later. So they support there's a lot of organized play. That's a big arm of FFG, and the fact that they're putting the brakes on everything is no small event. There's some other conventions that may be forced to cancel. Paizo Con, scheduled for May 22 to May 25th, is still scheduled to go on in Seattle, Washington, in one of the hot zones.
That's not happening.
It's like, I'm not going to make fun of the Paizo guys in 2 podcasts, but if you're gonna, if you don't have 2 brain cells, sorry, I'll shut up. I'm sure they're great. I'm sure they need to make their ends meet and put their convention on.
It's just such an epicenter up there, so
it's just like that's the one place people won't want to go.
Aside from maybe like New York, but yeah.
They have all of these conventions have so much money tied up into non-refundable deposits on all these venues, and all these venue guys are not just going to pat everybody on the head and say, no, we won't pay our mortgage this month because people aren't showing up to your Paizo Con.
I've wondered. I bet 50-50 on some of those things. I bet some of them are given like at least maybe a partial refund or something like that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But because that would be a real jerk move to take everybody's movie or money and be like, yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Well,
but, it's a part of the economy, though. When you're paying something, somebody's earning money to pay for food for their table.
Exactly. Somebody has to lose in this equation, and if these conventions push that all the way back to the attendees, are the attendees going to be the people that are stuck empty-handed? And quite frankly, as a Gen Con attendee, I am a little worried and a little nervous that this will dramatically hurt Gen Con if it persists through the summer. So I'm still optimistic that it won't. But Origins Game Fair is currently scheduled for June 17th to June 21. They're going to make a go no go decision on May 1st.
Yeah.
So we got a little over a month for them, and that'll be a huge bellwether. If Origins Game Fair, if everybody's showing up in masks or the attendee numbers are way down, it's really gonna tell us a lot about how Gen Con is gonna fare, because Origins Game Fair is like pre-Gen Con, and everybody knows that. And I'm still mad I've never gone, and I wanted to go every year, but I have a spouse who only has so much tolerance for my gaming addiction.
So I'm going to be honest with you. If it's a go this year, I'm probably going to go. And the reason why is that my brother lives in Columbus, and because our kids' school has been canceled for the rest of the school year, I don't have to deal with end of school year craziness. We're dealing with end of school year craziness right now. Yeah. So, and like sports and stuff has been canceled. So all of a sudden my schedule during that time frame has freed up considerably. So if they decide that it's a go, I think I'm going to get my brother and we're going to go check it out.
Right. And I think in June we'll know whether or not this virus is run its course or if it's still hot.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if things are looking good, I might want to go, but I know I'll get vetoed, so let's not even talk about it.
Yeah, fair enough.
So just in the last bit of news, there's a couple tabletop simulator options that are freeing up. Fantasy Grounds on Steam has a 75% off sale, so you can get on their virtual D&D table or RPG tabletop for about $10, or 50% off their Ultimate License bundle for about $74. So if you all are really enjoying and really want to double down on that, that might be a great option for you. Roll20 has released multiple products for free, and they have increased its server capacity to compensate for the additional load. And this is really exciting to me that Roll20 has that kind of muscle, that they would be able, the financial muscle, and to be able to spin up those servers in the cloud to compensate.
Yeah, we talked about Roll20 a little bit last week, and how they've come a long way since their Kickstarter.
Oh man, I've been on and off of Roll20 over the years, and I've never really had a problem with it, but I could see how a lot of TLC and a lot of users could really, obviously improve that platform.
Yeah.
There's one more called Astral. They've made their paid features and will upgrade all accounts to Pro until the end of April. That's really cool of them. Astral has, for you, they have built in Shadows of the Demon Lord.
Oh, nice.
In an automated way. So they have the automated character sheet. So it's not as so you're not hopping back and forth between the digital and the analog as much. So
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, I was looking at the they support about 6 systems, and I saw Shadows of the Demon Lord on there. I wanted to make sure that was on your list.
Nice, awesome. Wow, that was a lot of news to get through, but you know what? Like it's interesting to see how some of our news stories have shifted from, big events that are coming up to how can we continue to game in this time of uncertainty, and I think it's very interesting, and I think it shows that you have a community of gamers that are very interested and committed to still playing games despite what's going on maybe in the world,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, the whole point of enjoying gaming, at least from the analog side, is that personal connection.
Yeah.
And basically, unless you're playing with 6 people in your house, you're missing that unless you do an alternative means over using technology.
Right. Yep. So let's get into Star Wars, buddy. You just ran. I thought it was a good topic to talk about right now because, like we said, you just finished up your 3-story arc that we had going for us, and I thought it would be good to do one of our first game reviews of the Star Wars RPG system. So let's talk about the IP. You are a huge Star Wars fan. huge Star Wars
I have
fan.
real problems, big problems.
One could say addict, but that's not strong
fair.
enough
No,
verbiage, I think.
I don't think addict is strong. I think you've got to come up. You've got to come up with a deeper, more pejorative phrase to really capture. And I would be okay with it. I'd be like, yeah, you're pretty much right.
So, in terms of the IP, how do you feel that Fantasy Flight Games has handled the Star Wars IP in terms of a game system?
Okay, so just so everyone knows, I go back to the original Star Wars role-playing game from the late 1980s. It was the thing that got me into tabletop gaming. I did not start playing D&D first like everybody else. I started playing Star Wars first. And the barrier to entry was pretty low. They just had one core book that was it was probably about 100 pages, and then one source book for a long time. It took them a while to start putting out those products. And so
that was a D20 game, right?
It was not. The first one was D6. And so here's another fun thing about that. That old system was all you had to do was buy the book, and if you had 2 or 3 board games with D6s in your house, you could ape those dice, and you could start playing, which was pretty great. And D6s were easy to come by if you go to places where people were selling craps dice. They would work just fine in a pinch.
Which, you growing up in Las Vegas, they were everywhere.
It was not hard to get your hands on some Now, trust me, if you got to roll 8 D6 with those sharp craps dice, it's not as fun, to be quite honest. But there's a lot to be said for this. So I played that. I played it and I ran it for all the way from being a very, very young man all the way through college, and a little bit in graduate school as well. So I played it a long time. And during that period of time, Wizards of the Coast got the license, and they put out their D20 version. It was heavily based on the 3.0 and 3.5 version of D&D, and it was called there's the Star Wars RPG and the revised core rulebook. They went and cleaned it up a little bit, and then they came out with a third version of the D20 game called Saga, which I bought every book and we played the heck out of it, and because we liked it, and it was the best of the D20 versions. If you wanna, I know a lot of people online are like, how can I turn 5e? How can I get 5e? How can I skin it for Star Wars? I just say, just play Saga. It is pretty much there. Don't sweat it. Because there were a lot of ideas they were road testing in Saga that they would test stuff out in Saga Edition and slip it into 4e. And they would road test ideas, slip it into Saga, or road test it in Saga and then slip it into 5e. So when you're playing 5e and you're rolling with advantage and disadvantage, guess where that came from? All the game mechanics and talents that were like, okay, roll 2d20, pick the high, or roll 2d20 and pick the low. So we'd already been doing that forever,
Interesting.
It just wasn't as much of a core mechanic. So if you want to know how D&D 5e came up with their spell system that everybody hated, they developed that inside of the Star Wars RPG for Saga first. So it was a great game. So anyway, when FFG got the license, I was so skeptical.
Yeah.
Because I thought we had reached the pinnacle, and I had made an investment, and I was like, I don't want to start over. But it was Jay, who's on our podcast. He said, well, we need to try out we need to get our gaming group back together. Let's just buy the $20 beginner game and just play through the beginner game and see how that goes. And FFG puts out a fantastic $20 beginner game.
It's a really good one. It's a really good one.
You got custom dice, you got full color books. I know they're making those at cost. And the character sheets are gorgeous with full color artwork that's very engaging, and those folio pages explain the game, tell you what the symbols mean, and then you turn the page and now you've leveled up. You can check this box or this box, and you can raise this stat or this stat. And so by the time you've played through an evening, you've taken on a character, you've leveled the character up, and it's great. So the beginner games are so good. They came out with one for each of the 3 lines, plus there was a Force Awakens beginner game that they released. I recommend all 4 of them. I own 3 of the 4, and they are they're just fantastic.
You ran a couple years ago. Ran the Force and Destiny one with us at our little local SeanCon.
Yes.
And man, that was such a fun game. It was so much fun. Like, you're playing these characters that are like, I mean, and they're really good about this in the starter kits, right? The characters are a little OP, right?
Mm-hmm,
like
just a little.
You're just a little. I mean, not too much, but they're a little OP because you can go in there and you can have a great fight, and you're like, man, I feel like a superhero in here,
yes,
you know?
Yes.
And you walk away thinking, that was a lot of fun. I literally felt like a superhero. You know, because we were doing some crazy stuff. Like, remember, I think in our game, Jason had force. There was a guy behind a rock, and I didn't have line of sight, and I was like the sniper. And he did a force raise where he lifted him up off the ground with his force power, and then I shot him through the head. Yeah. Remember? Oh, yeah. It was just so epic.
Yeah, that was some creative GMing to go, yeah, just go with that rule. And that's kind of the yes and RPG. You know, if somebody has a great idea, the answer is to not start with a no, but start with a yes, and figure out a way to make that role possible. But yeah, we got to a yes that night. It was good. It's just the beginner games are great. So if after this review you're interested in playing but you don't want to really invest, there's 4 beginner games. You know, if you're into the sequel trilogy with, you know, Rey and Finn and Poe, you can jump into The Force Awakens. If you're into the world of Han Solo and Chewie and the bounty hunters and Mandalorian, there's Edge of the Empire for you. If you really love the military aspect of Star Wars, there's Age of Rebellion. And Force and Destiny, if you really want to play Force-sensitive characters and go through the large space opera drama of what does the Force mean for you and your character and stuff. And so those are the 3 lines. Now, you don't have to buy all 3 lines to play the games. This is a really important point for those who may not be familiar. You only have to buy 1 core rulebook. So there's an Age of the Empire core rulebook, a Force and Destiny core rulebook, and an Age of Rebellion core rulebook. Okay, all you need is 1. And you'd be like, well, what am I not getting if I buy 1? Are there pieces that you're not getting? There's a few things, but the things that are unique to each of the core rulebooks are unique to the different flavor of the game. Because if you want to, if your friends are like, yeah, I want to do a paramilitary thing, I want to be in the rebellion, and I want to make sure, you know, we're going in and we're freedom fighters, and they're all driven by that. There's rule sets in Age of Rebellion to reinforce that, to say, okay, you're part of a larger military, and as you fulfill the duties that they've given you, then there's good things that'll come your way. Yeah. If you're Edge of the Empire, everybody starts off like Han Solo. You owe somebody something somewhere. You've got a negative thing happening to your character called an obligation, which is a lot of fun. And it really engages all the players very quickly into the story because the GM is encouraged to pull in those obligations and affect the narrative that way. And they're not always bad. They tend to be more fun than bad. But because you take on obligation, you also get some extra XP, or you get to start with a pot of money, or you get to start with a ship that you can't afford. So obligation is actually super fun. Force and Destiny, as you can imagine, has to track where you are getting closer or further away from the light side or the dark side. So there's a morality mechanic there. And that can be fun too, as you make certain choices with your character. If you feel conflicted about what you're doing, that conflict can pull you away from the light and closer to the dark. You know, if you're watching Kylo Ren get real emo about him feeling like he's being pulled back to the light, there's a literal game mechanic that demonstrates that has happened for Kylo, that he didn't accumulate enough conflict, and he rolled and his morality score went up and he was mad about it. So so all of these game mechanics, and I have played. There's only one version of this role-playing game for the IP that I've not GM'd and I only played in. But this is by far my favorite. And I loved the West End Games version. I loved Saga. But this is the best version because nothing has given me the pure flavor of Star Wars, of cinematic, narrative storytelling, like the way this mechanic works. And so for those who are not familiar, if you are familiar, I'm sorry if I'm repeating a lot of stuff. But this is a custom dice game. So put away all your the D20s that you bought from these really awesome third-party producers. They're all useless to you. You can get the dice. You can buy them directly from the company. You can buy a dice app, which is fun, for about $5 or $6 for Android or iOS.
And it works pretty well.
It works pretty great, and if you don't want to figure out what symbols mean what, it'll do a lot of the homework for you. So it's actually more useful. The app is actually more useful than rolling the plastic dice,
especially for a beginner. Yeah.
Yeah. If you get the beginner game, it comes with one set of the special dice, and that's all you need for the beginner game is one set. So you don't have to feel like, oh, do I need to go supplement it? You pretty much don't. And you have to share dice. Now, in the era of COVID-19, that is a very different proposition than it was 2 or 3 weeks ago.
I mean, let's be honest. First off, what are you doing around the table together?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So there's step one.
If you don't want him picking up the dice, why are you sitting 2 feet away?
That's right.
So there is that. There is that.
Now the dice themselves, I mean, they look like D12s and D8s essentially, right?
They have
and
12s, 8s, and 6s.
Yeah, but you can't convert like, oh, I rolled a 6 and that means this symbol. It's really difficult to.
You can, but you would never want to do it.
No, it's too much convert. I say you can't. You can. You're absolutely right. But it's just way too much conversion, like, already.
They have a chart. So. They have a chart in every book. But if you enjoy mowing the lawn with a pair of scissors...
Exactly. That's a great analogy.
You're like, okay, here's your scissors. Go to it, man. Then I'll see you in about 3 weeks when you get done with the lawn. So just don't do it. You can. When the games came out in beta format, they were releasing stickers that you could buy, blank dice or existing dice that you didn't care about, and cover them with stickers, and that would do the trick. That's no longer necessary. There's plenty of dice available on the market. They're about $13, $14 for a pack of about a dozen dice. I can't say it's a screaming good deal, but at the same time, you don't need more than 2 or 3 packs max to play the game.
Yeah.
You really have to be playing high-end Force users for multiple years in like Force and Destiny to want to get that 5th, 6th pack. You really don't need it. So and the app, you could buy the app one time for $6 and never ever need to mess with the plastic ever, and it is perfectly great. Right. So, but how it works is there's positive dice and negative dice. Positive dice are either yellow, green, or blue, and they have positive symbols on them. There are negative dice that are red, purple, and black, and you roll them all together. You roll the difficulty in the dice, and this is another thing that I'm becoming a big fan of, is take the charts out of the book, put the charts and the difficulties in the dice pool, and that's a lot of fun. Because as a GM, it really makes preparation very easy, because you can make on-the-spot decisions about how difficult or complex something should be. Very simply. You can say, well, but it's raining. Let's throw in a setback die. Or this is extremely complicated in a very nuanced way. We need to really upgrade this and swap out it for the heavier duty or difficulty dice. And so it's really great for GMs. The other way it's great for GMs is there's no level. There's no levels. Okay, so in D&D, you're level 1, level 2, level 3. So if you have a group of 6 level 1 characters, you're not going to throw a red dragon at that group, because they will just trounce them to death. There's not really that capability in this game. You kind of the game master just has to go with their gut feeling about how certain difficult obstacles, how that game master can make things more or less difficult. And because it's a dice pool system, if you've determined early in the encounter that you don't want to do a total party kill, you can start manipulating the dice pool to give the players an edge, or vice versa. if you think you've put together this really heavy duty, complex or hard encounter, and you forgot that a couple of your players have really great talents and they're going through it like a hot knife through butter, it is very, very simple to really dial up the heat on them very quickly without changing the story, without changing, and now 100 more stormtroopers show up. You don't have to do that. You can make changes to the dice pool on the fly, and that can be a lot of fun for the GM, because the prep that I have to do as a GM is much more now on story and much less on stats.
It's interesting because they call the dice narrative dice for a reason, right? Because the dice are part of the storytelling element of the game that you're doing. What's interesting, like when you play D&D, right? And I'm going to use D&D and most D20
and we love
systems,
D&D, and we love D20.
Right?
We love this stuff.
And so, like, the thing is like, you've got your modifiers that you have, because, like, if I'm really buffed up, I've got a, +5 proficiency bonus, I've got my weapons bonuses, I've got my strength bonus that I'm adding in there, and then you roll your thing and you add your modifiers, and, obviously the higher level you get, the more difficult it is to fail, right? Because you've got so many modifiers stacking on that, even if you rolled a 2, it ends up being a 10 or 12 or 15 or something for whatever reason, So so that's kind of nice for the D20s, but it's when you're low level and you don't have all those things, you can easily fail too much.
Yeah, and the D20 can beat you upside the head.
Yeah,
because it has a flat probability curve.
Yep, and then if you're super high level, it's almost impossible to fail on a lot of things, right? And so what's interesting is the GMs have to come up with, like, high armor save characters, so that you have to, like, beat a 25 armor class or something like that. Or the difficulty challenge is now, like, 18 for a simple investigation. You know what I mean? Where it was like 10 when they were level 1.
Right. Or you have to keep the stat block secret, because you don't want to let the player know that they're immune to fire damage.
Yeah.
And they keep throwing fireballs, and you're like, okay, thanks for the fireball. Nothing happened.
Yeah, exactly. And so the interesting thing with these narrative dice is exactly what you said. You say, all right, well, let's look at this situation here. The pavement's slick because it was just raining. So we're going to throw in an extra difficulty for you, like maybe in the form of a setback dice or an upgraded challenge or something like that. And you can say, okay, you as a player, what are you trying to do here? Like in our last game, Jason was the driver of the van, right? And he wanted to, like, maneuver the van, try to hit somebody, and at the same time it was like spinning, jetpack out of the van, jump behind a crate, and grab a weapon. I mean, it was like this crazy epic maneuver, right? And you're like, yeah, that's going to be pretty difficult. And, and you have the flexibility as a GM to say, yeah, that's going to be very difficult for you to do. Here's what your dice pool is going to look like if you're going to try that.
Yeah.
And he knows what his part of the dice pool is based on his talents and his stats. So I think it does give a lot of flexibility. And
you can tell the story by saying what dice you're throwing in the pool. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
You can say, well, I'm going to give you a boost die because remember we established that you knew this guy from your prior life as a thug, and and there's different dice that tell you different things. There's dice that are based on your innate abilities. They're your characteristics, right? Your basic stats. The 6 basic stats, just like every other RPG. And those dice can tell you things. And then there's dice that are more powerful because you've been trained in a skill, and those are yellow dice. And so if your yellow dice are the things that's helping you win, you can say, well, clearly all of your training as a Jedi is paying off right here because you were expertly able to use your lightsaber. Or if all of those are getting canceled out and the only thing left is the boost die of the circumstance, and you can say, oh, the reason why this worked was because, you shot this arrow and the wind was blowing in your direction and you would have missed, but the wind just caught it and now you hit the bad guy in the eyeball and now he's dead. So there's a lot. You can just look at the dice pool as you play the game to give the GM ideas to how to narrate what's happening.
It definitely makes it feel more epic because, again, when you're doing a difficulty check and it's a level 18 because you have level 20 characters that you're rolling with in D&D, right? It's hard to be like, well, it was expertly hidden in the room that was strewn about, because it's like you had to up the difficulty so there was a chance of failure or something like that, but really there's no narrative behind it. It's just that you're playing against their stats versus the story, right?
And there's two different dice for those who are not familiar with. It can create what's called a triumph or what's called a despair. There's a positive game effect called a triumph. There's a 1 out of 12 chance on every positive dice that there's a triumph opportunity, which means there's certain statistical things you can do to help get a crit on a foe or, activate some other powers that you have in your stat block, but you can also use it to influence the story. You can say, and now because I got a triumph, this door comes down, and now there's a door between Darth Vader and Han Solo, and now Darth Vader can't go kill Han Solo, which he was about to do. Yeah. And those can't be canceled out. The same with despairs. Despairs are bad things that happen to you in that same way. So in the last game we played, I did throw Darth Vader at my players because I wanted to see at least one player die that night. There's a long. I make fun of Justin because he keeps telling me that every time he plays Star Wars, he's invincible and he can't die. But anyway, Darth Vader, I rolled the dice pool in front of the players. He saw it all digitally, and he straight up got a despair.
Yeah.
And so how do you adjudicate that? Well, guess what? He fell down the waterfall because the Wookiee he killed, he did kill that Wookiee, but the Wookiee in his last breath pushed him off the edge. He bear hugged him, and they both went falling off the waterfall together. And that's because you have to be prepared to be willing to let the dice help tell the story. Yeah. Because if you have a narrative in your head that you can't walk away from, then this may not be the system for you. If you really like a very structured narrative as a writer, as a game master, dungeon master, the dice will get in your way. The dice will be like, no, actually, your guys are way more, are doing a great job, or in some cases you can determine how big of a bad guy you're going to throw at the good guys based on if they get a despair or not. And my players two nights ago, had tallied up a couple despairs, and I was like, well, they've gotten a couple despairs. I'm not going to throw punches. They have to deal with the Lord of Sith, and they were tough enough to handle that. But at the same time, that was the dice telling the story, not me going, I'm a jerk GM and I'm here to arm twist you into having a negative gameplay experience.
So I think that there's two kind of beginner curves, right, for a new player playing here. One, learning how to read the dice quickly.
Yeah,
that's a really tough thing because essentially dice cancel each other out. Your good dice your bad dice will cancel out the good dice, and you have to quickly figure out how many successes did you get, how many failures did you get, and kind of do the math on the fly. So that is, for a new player, probably the most difficult aspect of the game, is figuring that part out. But the other thing is, believe it or not, I think it's using your imagination to tell the story according to the dice, just exactly what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Because what'll happen is, this happened the night. The Grand Inquisitor said, "Oh dear, I'm bugging out. You guys are a little tough for me." Because Darth Vader decided to bug out. So he jumped out of this waterfall thing, and he was using his lightsaber like a helicopter thing, which we established was canon.
It's canon
because it was in the
Rebels cartoon. Exactly. That's a canon move. It had a game effect.
Yeah, so he was using exactly. So he was using that as a little like rotating helicopter thing, if anything, just to float down to the other level. And I went to go shoot him, and I missed him, but I got a whole bunch of advantages, which allowed me to kind of shift the narrative a little bit, because I still got a bunch of advantages, right? And so as a player, I had to come up with what was happening in the story, because the dice were telling me, hey, player, you didn't succeed, but you got enough of other good rolls to help you adjust the story a little bit. And so I had to think quickly on the fly, and I said, okay, well, I didn't hit him. That's the first thing I established, right? I did not shoot him. But I got something really good, so I told you, the GM, I want to shoot the lightsaber. right?
I'm like,
that he's
okay.
flying with, and so it doesn't shoot him or injure him because I failed on that, but it still does some good, and sure enough, it shot him, and then he fell 10 stories right into the water.
It had the same basic effect, but you as a marksman, your character as a markswoman actually missed. But you got 6 advantage, which is a crazy stack of advantage, which is like mind-blowing. You're like, well, this is a payday amount of advantage, but you just can't. What you're going to tell me, you can't shoot this character. You're like, well, I'll shoot his vehicle. And that was great. And so you have to be.
And so coming up with that on the fly is hard for a new player, I think.
Yes,
because they're not used to it. You don't get it. You don't get to drive the story like that in a D&D game.
Right, and so some GMs are okay taking over the narrative for the player, and that's cool for the group, especially with new players. I've seen that. I've seen areas where it's like, no, this is my role. I want to decide what I want to do with it. You just have to kind of feel out. Or as a GM, what you can do is you can say, well, you could spend it this way if you wanted to, and give them a choice. That way they have agency.
Or some rails, right? Like with 3 successes, this is the type of things that you could do. With 6 successes, you can kind of tell me all these things that you can do, that type of thing. So. Yeah,
and so you just get used to it. The math is really not that bad because you're never usually dealing more than a number higher than 10. I mean, it's really strange to get 10 pips of one thing. So you're counting on your fingers and subtracting on the fly based on the roll. And there's apps and there's online rollers that'll do it for you instantaneously if that really bugs you. So there's certainly great ways around that if it bothers you. But the creative piece of going, okay, well, the way the dice work, for those who may not be familiar, you can determine success or failure just like any other die roll, but then there's advantage or threat. So there's a second access. So you can fail with a lot of advantage or you can succeed with a lot of threat, right?
Yeah.
Han Solo successfully scared off one stormtrooper down the hallway. And then he realized there was a room full of stormtroopers he was chasing him into, and that was threat, right? So he succeeded with threat. And then there's another vector, which is the triumph and despair thing we already talked about before.
Yeah.
So anytime you roll the dice, you can fail, get advantage, and also have a despair, or some combination of those 6 vectors. And for me, as a GM and as a player, that's so much more fun for me than just a binary succeed or failure. And I know there's success or failure. I know there's some games like Shadows of the Demon Lord where it's trying to help you get to that resolution faster. They're like, you succeeded, keep going. No, you failed, don't worry about it. Let's go to the next thing. And this is the opposite because it takes longer to adjudicate. But at the same time, the weirdest stuff can happen in a game that turns out to be so epic.
Yeah, a lot more nuance in the situation, right?
Yeah, like the GM who's running Star Wars A New Hope, Episode 4. Well, yeah, you successfully scared off those 2 troops, but because you ran into a room full of 100 troops, now you're in real trouble. If I was doing that in another system, I would look like a total jerk. I'd be like, well, look what I can do. I'm God of this universe. Here's 100 bad guys to deal with. But in this case, it's the dice telling you. And that's the social contract that everybody's going to go along with what comes out of the dice.
That's interesting. You're almost playing against the dice rather than the GM in a sense, right?
Absolutely. So, and the GM, for me, if you're a GM, you're also a player.
Yeah.
And for me, it's more fun to GM this type of game than it is a few other types that I played because it throws me curveballs every time, and I can't predict what's going to happen. Anytime somebody picks up the dice and drops them, I can think I know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But 1 out of 3 times I'm completely wrong, and there's
probabilities, of course, right? That you think something's going to happen, but you could just get some good dice rolls or really bad ones. You just never know.
Yeah, like we would be counseling a player, and then do this, and then do this. You'll get all these extra boost dice, and you're just going to pwn this bad guy. You're just going to ruin that guy's day. He drops the dice, and it's full of blanks on the good side, and he barely tapped the bad guy, and you're like, oh, well, that sucked.
You whiffed bad, dude.
You whiffed. I don't know what to tell you, man.
Yeah. All right, so let me ask you this. On a scale of 1 to 10, where would you rate Star Wars RPG in terms of fun?
you're talking to the wrong guy. I mean,
I know
it's like saying, "Do you love your children?" Well, yes, I love my children. I love them so much. I can't not love them. What are you talking about?
Oh, I know. So let me
tell
the
you,
Dan Pomeroy. Give me the Dan Pomeroy is going to be like a 15, right?
Let me tell you why it's fun. It's fun when you're starting out in the beginner box, and it's fun when you've played a 2 or 3 year campaign with high level characters. Even though it's a lot of dice and it's a lot of more rules that you're adjudicating, it has that level of depth. There's a lot of RPGs out there that are really fun to play that only have 1 or 2 books, and then you're like, oh, well, there's nothing else in this that's interesting for me because I've kind of squeezed, right. I've gotten all the juice out of these 3 books, and now I'm bored. This is there's 3 role-playing game lines here. There's extra supplements. The game is going to continue on in the hands of another publisher, and it is just as deep and complex as any hardcore RPG that you would want. Or you can dumb it down and you can play the beginner box and have a blast. Every note you can play between the beginner game and having, uber powerful force god characters, you're going to have a good time. Yeah. And that's great. And the characters really matter, and you don't feel like you're just playing a stat block. You feel like you're playing a character. And no character can be good at everything. You're gonna suck at something, and that's fun too. Is knowing where your weaknesses are, and it just always holds up for me and it always feels like you're inside of a Star Wars show or movie.
Yeah.
So that's what's fun for me. You can play as a newbie. I played it with my kids. They like it. We don't play it all the time, but they played it and enjoyed it. And I played it with my, hardcore gamer friends at a multi-year Force and Destiny campaign where everybody was picking up and throwing very large objects around with the Force. And it's still the same game, and it's still great. You can I think it's easier to get to the feeling of a level 20 character in Star Wars than playing actual D&D and trying to get to level 20 from level 1. You will be able to do some cool stuff after 6 or 8 months of play if you really plan your character out. So it is fun, and I had a lady who worked for me at work. She's like, yeah, my husband bought this beginner game called Star Wars, and I started salivating, and she's like, it was us and like 2 other couples, and we had the best time ever. And she's like, my husband thinks we should play a campaign. I'm not sure if I want to do that. I'm like, if he wants to run a campaign, he can borrow all of my books anytime. I'm here to help.
She didn't know what she was getting into when she brought it up with him.
I'm like, I don't think you understand that this is my main hobby in life and the thing that I do for fun. And so yeah, I'm hooked on it, but I think it has good reason, and the people who love it for a reason. It doesn't have the same notoriety as D&D, but the IP is more accessible. Yeah. The IP is way more accessible. It's really easy to get a feel for what's happening in the Star Wars universe between all the movies and all the video games and TV shows. It's almost impossible. I've only played with one person, and that was in college. I was like, okay, so you've seen Star Wars, right? She's like, no. I was like, I don't know what to do with you at the table. I don't know how to help you. She's like, I just want to play a character with powers. And I'm like, okay, you're a Jedi. She's like, a what? And I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, I don't know how to help you. It was the cute girlfriend of one of my buddies,
Yeah.
But that's a great thing. That's another thing that makes it fun is the barrier to entry for the story is so low.
Yeah.
I mean.
It's very true. Very true.
So.
Well, like we said before, there's Force and Destiny, Age of Resistance, Edge of Empire.
Age of Rebellion.
Oh, sorry, Age of Rebellion. And we are going to probably do some deep dives in the future on those to really flesh them out and kind of, be able to contrast and compare a little bit between the different systems. But if you are interested in Star Wars RPG, pick up a beginner box, try it out with, 4 or 5 of your best friends, and I'm telling you, you will not be disappointed. It's $20 that split amongst 5 people is way cheaper than a movie or a dinner out, and you will have a great time. So check it out, and with that, I think that we're going to wrap up this week's show.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for holding on to the end. I know we went a little long. I apologize.
No, it's okay. It's a great system. We had a lot of fun news, and we'll catch you all next week.
Later, Gators.
Have a good one.
See you. Bye.